Welcome to the What Drives You podcast. I'm Kevin Miller. I produce this show to help us all continually discover where we want to go, why, and how to best get there, all the while enjoying the daily drive as much as the destinations we want to reach. In this episode, I'm looking at how considering your death will improve your life right now. And the point of this podcast is to better fuel your drive so you can achieve more fulfillment overall. So I've met very few people who want to talk about death. We avoid it like, well, death. It's black and dark and to be feared, at least in our American culture. But 7 months ago, my dad got a surprise cancer diagnosis and he died 6 weeks later. I was fortunate to walk with him daily until his last breath. I went from zero exposure to death to full exposure, and it's altered my life for the better. My brother, Jared Angaza, he was there as well, and he participated intimately as what we found out was called a death doula, walking with my dad intimately in his personal care and spiritual ponderings. We never really heard the term death doula before. Well, divinely, I was contacted shortly after by an agency about having Alua Arthur on this podcast. Alua is the most visible death doula working in America today. She trains and educates other death doulas and walks with people in the end days of their lives, from basic planning to nurturing their souls and the lives of their loved ones. Alua has spent literally thousands of hours with people as they contemplate their mortality, when regrets and secret joys and hidden affairs and dim realities are finally revealed out loud. And it is for this insight I wanted to talk with her. She has a TED Talk titled Why Thinking About Your Death Helps You Live a Better Life. It's got 1.5 million views. She's been featured on CBS's The Doctors, and I've now seen her on Disney's Limitless docu-series with Chris Hemsworth. Alua's journey to death personally started when her family fled a murderous coup d'etat in Ghana. Well, she went on to become a lawyer here in the States, but after walking with a close friend through his death, she devoted herself to walking with others and educating us on what we can gain in our lives today from considering our death in the future, instead of just avoiding it. So I'm going to be referencing Alua's new book. It's called Briefly, Perfectly Human: Making an Authentic Life by Getting Real About the End. And it's her raw, no holds barred, honest, often hilarious memoir that shares her powerful message with people all around the world at this point. You can also find more out about her and about a death doula at goingwithgrace.com. So I sat down with Alua to talk about her insights with death and how they can help us, again, lead more authentically driven and rewarding lives right here now in our life. As you hear this, if you got a question for me, for Alua, let me know. kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Just yesterday, somebody listened to an episode. They emailed me. I got it. I responded back. It's a blast to engage with you guys on what really matters. What drives you becomes your reality. So let's work on creating a better reality right here and right now. So drive with me as we explore how considering our pending death, how it can improve our lives right now. Hey, Lua, I have been looking forward to having you on the show for about 4 months. And I'm glad it's taken that long because it's given me more time to ponder your message and what you're about. And it is incredibly relevant to my life right now. And I'm just honored. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm also looking forward to our conversation today.
You know, looking at, I assume, which it's dangerous to assume, but it seems like myself and the culture is, death is not a hot party topic. It's not something that we want to, it's kind of a should. And yet I had a recent experience, one, and two, reading your book, it made me think of it like, no, this is something that we would want to share. This is an experience that, if you've had the privilege, hard word maybe, of having it, that you realize, oh my gosh, I want people to experience this. I want my family, I want those that I care about to experience this, not because it's some should, not because it's, you should be responsible and mature and think about the end of life. As you brought me to, no, if I want to get the most out of life today, I will consider my death. And bringing that to your TED Talk, which folks, if you haven't seen that, type in or go to TED or type in Alua and do why thinking about death helps you live a better life. That's the point. That's why so many, millions of people have listened to it. And that's what you're living. Do you still find that you have to overcome that hurdle though? People look at it and go, oh, that's a should that we're talking about. And you're going, no, this is a today issue.
All the time. I mean, people often think you shouldn't think about it or it's not important to think about it unless you're on the precipice yourself or somebody in your life is. But as you were saying, it's another privilege to get to think about our mortality while we're still healthy. And even if we're not, there are so many people that are dying in ways that are just abhorrent to my spirit right now and have since time immemorial. And they don't get to sit and think about, well, what kind of death would I like and what kind of life do I want to lead as a result of it? And so since we have the opportunity to exercise that privilege, we absolutely should. And we should do it now and not something that we should wait on. We get to inject so much more purpose into our lives when thinking about our mortality consistently.
It goes along with, as a guy, guys, especially guys that are getting older like myself, and he'll talk about legacy, but really in the prime of life, legacy, whatever, man, you're just living it up and going after today, and thinking about that feels like a should, or being involved in the health and wellness arena and thinking about old age health. And we think, yeah, we should, but we'll deal with it when we get there. And again, death. And yet I find as I have hopefully matured or evolved a little bit, that those are the things that help me understand the best life has to offer today. And so I got a story for you that I didn't tell you before we started. You ready?
Yes. Am I nervous for good reason?
No, I'm about to just tell you why I am completely in your alley here.
Okay.
I learned about you when I was here in this office. So this is my father's office where he had a podcast. He's a best-selling author. His name's Dan Miller. 48 Days to the Work You Love is his book. And I'm sitting in his office. And as you see behind me, the shelves are bare.
Yeah.
And he got an end-of-life diagnosis on December 7th of 2023. And it was stage 4 pancreatic cancer that had already spread. And he passed away on January 21st of 2024. So 6 weeks. And it happened. I was doing my shows in this office, but the bookshelves were full while he was in his palliative care, bed in the other room. And now the walls are empty because they are boxing. I got boxes sitting next to me. My mom's moving. This was their dream house. It doesn't work without him. I wanted to talk to you since then because I had never heard the term of death doula until that point. And I think it was within a week or so of hearing it that I got an email from whatever agency you're with. I don't remember, going, hey, we've got this girl. She's a death doula, which I never would have heard of. It probably wouldn't have really hit me before then. And so again, you being here feels fairly divine to me. So thank you.
It seems like it to me too,
Yeah.
6 weeks is not a lot of time.
Mm-mm.
That's
Mm-mm.
very quick. Very quick. And also, I think also fast that it's been about 6 months and you've already done the work to clear out some of the space and the moving is happening because that's another part of the grief that people often forget.
Yeah.
Like there's the grieving, the diagnosis, the death occurs, and then a lot of it is re-triggered when you are packing up stuff or trying to figure out what to do with their possessions. It can all be really, really difficult. I'm sorry that you're in this experience. And I'm also, I think, pleased to feel the grace with which you're moving through it.
I do feel that. So here I want to start off with a question because I got to experience, and my family, the day-to-day walking with him from diagnosis to decisions on what he was going to do to fight or not or whatnot till the last breath. We got to see that. I think you would, well, I can't say that, how you would say it. To me, it seems like it was a beautiful experience, and I can share the profundity of his journey and our journey along with that. But on the other side, I imagine it could have been, quote, terrible and he was horrible and whatever. But I'm guessing, well, no, I'm not guessing. I mean, from your book, though, I would say there's possibly as much to learn from either way. Fair?
Absolutely. Very much fair. And also, we approach our dying much like we approach life. And none of it is right or wrong. Everybody has a relationship to their mortality. Everybody's going to move through in a particular way. So yeah, it's absolutely fair that either one would be just fine with me.
Well, because I'm looking at it and going, okay, here is somebody. And I mean, there's no reason to pull any punches. This is the end. They know it's the end. And so we see what comes to fruition, which it reminded me kind of, I had a buddy one time who said he was going to write a book called 3 Drinks In. And it was people who are 3 drinks in, because he said, you find out who they really are.
That's true.
Are they angry people? That's going to come out when they're drunk. Are they intense? Are they doubtful? Are they funny? Whatever. It's going to come out, 3 drinks in generally, and you're going to find out at least what state they are then. What I'm expecting now, and what is, again, so profound to my life here today, right now, breathing, is, okay, if it happened today, what would come out? What's there? Because that's what's germinating, and I want to see what comes out. I had a great experience, but does that line up with your experience with walking with people in the last days?
100%. We become, I think, more of who we are as we're dying from disease or illness. I think also just the process of elderhood, we become more of who we are. We shed a lot of the societal expectations. We kind of shed all the masks that we put up for the world. And when faced with our mortality, when looking at it head on, that's when the truth of our being really sits at the forefront. Granted, there are elements of some diseases that impact our personality or the way that we engage with the world, like Alzheimer's and dementia.
Okay.
But then also some medications might impact that. But for the most part, I find that people that generally move through life with some grace experience the same thing as they're getting close to the end. People that fight to adapt at every stage of their lives also fight to adapt to being in a sick body or approaching the end of their lives. People that are angry or joyful or impatient or frustrated, all those things, just we see all of humanity, all of the person's humanity as they're laying dying.
Do you, and I don't want to minimize anything or try to put things in a box, but just for us to think about it, going, if it happened to me, or when it happened, I mean, it's going to happen to all of us to some extent, obviously, or to some extent, in some way. But if it did, I wonder what category I would fall into. And do you have that? I mean, you just kind of rattled off some, but do you come into somebody, and I imagine within a fairly quick time, you realize, oh, this is what I'm dealing with. And you're seeing them in a moment of, time of death, but it showcases a mirror of what their life has been.
Very much so. Very much so. I see anger, I see beauty, I see grace, I see humor. Some people just get like really, really funny, and they were probably funny while they were living as well. But now elements of their disease are funny that they want to share. I think it's probably kind of similar to when they were 3 drinks in before. I try to think of myself 3 drinks in, and it's hard because I'm trying to witness myself now, but I think I'm kind of funny. I like to think that'd be maybe a good time, maybe adapting, maybe struggling in some ways, but kind of giggly.
Yeah. With that's what, and there's where I'm interested right there, and looking at, okay, whoever I am on the deathbed, it's who I am today. It's just what, magnified, would you say?
Incredibly. A big magnifying glass put on, it's amplified, but it's also interspersed with grief. But I also feel like people meet themselves in their grief in a real way. And when people are dying, they're grieving tremendously as well. And so we're getting to see who they are again without the mask, when like that core portion has been like cracked open. Because as people lay dying, we are grieving them. We're anticipatorily grieving their death. We've been maybe grieving all the little small losses that have been occurring, but they are grieving everything that they've ever known, leaving this place that they've known. They're letting go of all of the people. And so they're in deep grief as well, which has the capacity to also expose who we are. deep down.
I mean, coming to today, it had me thinking as I was pondering your book and your message. Well, and again, my own experience, because I had never experienced it, Alua. Um, I had never, other than a grandparent, and here they are in the casket kind of thing, and you show up
Yeah.
after they have a heart attack and they die. But to go through, so I got to, with my dad from the diagnosis, to see every day a little less, every day a little less, and to see him walk through that. And I came away, we as a family came away feeling like, I almost wish I could get a dose consistently,
Yeah.
like every month. Can I witness one? Kind of like you see the movies. I've never experienced it in real life, but where they have a surgery procedure and it's down and you've got seats up here where the other docs who are learning can learn or something like that. But to witness a real life, like it'd be gosh, I can't imagine somebody do it. It feels so intrusive, but to do like a reality TV show, which I don't watch those, I think I would watch that. And to see the person who goes, they're horrid, they're terrible, or they're sad, or they're regretful, or they're whatever, and find the ones that resonate with me, but get that kind of a monthly conviction in essence.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful idea. I mean, I get that by virtue of getting to talk to people about their mortality all the time and to get to witness people that are getting close to the end of life. And one thing that I'm constantly learning and seeing is how much more life it injects into my life, how much more life it brings me to get to be around dying all the time, or at least to be in the conversation around it, because it's very life affirming. And I know it's counterintuitive. And people hear me say that sometimes. They think I'm a wackadoodle. But the reality is that being around people who are in the process, who are facing the end of their lives, being around body where life has just left, is a powerful reminder that I still have my breath, that I'm still animated by that spark of something intangible that allows me to be present and to talk to you and to breathe air and to look at sun and to eat salad or to eat French fries. I'm still alive. And so it reminds me constantly about the gift that this life is. And that's something that I want for all of us, which is part of why I'm out here stumping, being with our mortality. It's available.
Yeah.
It's available all the time.
You know what I'm thinking, Elua, and I hadn't thought about it before, is we think about a doc. Okay. So I've had a couple docs, or well, a lot of docs on the show, but a couple who were neurologists, and so they're dealing with people, and a lot of them are near the end. Dr. Lee Warren, his first book was "I've Seen the End of You," and he was grappling with his faith. Yeah, so here he is as a man of faith, a Christian guy who believes in God and believes in miracles and prayer and whatnot. And so he has a patient here, and we're supposed to think that, and yet he's looking at their brain scan, and he's saying, "You're dead. I mean, I've seen the end of you," and grappling with his faith, within that. But it's interesting, and I hadn't thought about it till now, that he is experiencing that sobering aspect of death, but he's doing it within the context of trying to save their life. That's a different mindset, different environment, different vibe and energy, whatever you want to call it, than you, that's not a part of the deal at all. By the time you come in, they have left that. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really powerful work that he's doing.
It's incredibly powerful, but I'm thinking about you being on the other side. This is after somebody has, gosh, what would you say? Resigned somewhat?
Hmm. I think it's more affirmative than resigning.
Okay.
It's more proactive than that. I think of it as like an embracing of it. People often like to talk about accepting death, and that to me is a really, really high bar to accept the fact that we'll die. It's one thing to do the intellectual exercise about it, but when given a serious diagnosis and you're like, wow, this might be it, to really say, okay, this might be it now. What do I need to do in order to get my affairs in order? Or what are my relationships like right now? Or what do I still want out of this life? Or what have I not had that I need to grieve? When people can embrace the end of their lives, it switches the perspective a lot. A big component of my work has to be that the person has some awareness that their death is coming and that they've begun the embrace, because it's difficult when people don't have the acceptance or the embrace of their mortality. It's hard to work with people in that capacity because then we can't really have a real conversation about what they're grappling with, you know?
And there's some questions I want to ask about your experience, with people's death, but I still initially have some in regards to you.
Okay.
And, the book is very much about your story along with it. And here you are, relatively young dealing with this. You could have the idea that, if I was your friend and hanging out in your area going, I don't know if we want to invite, Alua. She's pretty serious, man. She's kind of intense. She deals with dead people all the time. She just doesn't, she's not a lot of fun. She doesn't, everything's again, so acute and yeah, just serious. And yet I know enough of what I have seen of you to know that that's not the case. So it's not that it just goes by, that you experience this, you consider death, and now you're not interested in I don't know a good word, because I almost want to say the frivolities of life, but is that fair? And how has it made you see some of those things? Do you tend to look at some things and go, it's just not that important now that I know this? And yet it doesn't mean that you're just Mrs. Intense and don't care about anything fun.
Yeah, no, I think I still am a lot of fun. I mean, you have to ask my friends, but I think also sometimes I speak a certain truth that sometimes people aren't ready to hear, and I think that's just by virtue of my personality.
Okay.
I have a hard time reading the room sometimes. But being close to death all the time, as I was saying before, it reminds me that I'm still living, you know? And while I'm here, I want to afford myself the fullness of my humanity, which means that I get frustrated in traffic sometimes, or I was really short with the receptionist at my dentist's office. And when looking at it from the perspective of my death, those things don't really matter. Yet when I am in my life, when I'm just going about it regularly, of course I get anxiety about my weight or being late to something. In the big picture, sure, they don't matter, but I want to be present in life. Is that making sense? You see what I'm
Sure.
saying?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So the things that seem frivolous are the things that make up this life. I was just sharing that I was recently with a friend who has a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, and leaving him, I was talking to another friend who had some frustration about the quality of the mangoes that she's been getting lately.
Right.
And that to me, it really tickled me because both things are true. One seems so much more important than the other. And
Yeah.
yet the other is still very much about how we're living. She wants tasty mangoes, girl. I get it. I get it. I get it.
In fair, I mean, we do hit those things now. Ever since that funny, there was at least that's where I got a hold of it, some funny smartphone ad, and it was first world problems. So we do that now. I find myself, yeah, you're kind of complaining about something. Yeah, first world problems, talking about the color of your new car,
Yeah.
or whatnot. It, what what brought me into this interest of, well, even what you do, death doula, walking with someone in their death. I mean, you do talk about helping with the circumstantial aspects of death and just helping the family navigate it well, and even the person, navigate that well, get their affairs in order, whatnot. How much of your work is that, and how much of it is really caring for the soul of the person and maybe the family members?
It's kind of a mixed bag. It'd be hard for me to really say, but let me just mention that we work with folks that are healthy also to complete some comprehensive end of life planning. So actually getting their affairs together when they are
Yeah.
still healthy and they've started to think about their mortality. And then when people know what they're going to be dying of, we can support them in creating the most ideal death for themselves under the circumstances. And then after a death occurs, we can help the family members wrap up affairs of their loved one's life. Now, some of that sounds very practical for most.
Right.
However, I find that the practical almost always opens up space for deeper conversations. Some people come because they want help with the practical things. Other people come because they're trying to navigate the complexity of their relationships, or they are grieving some element of their lives, or they're trying to reconcile their lives in some capacity. And some are grappling with deep spiritual questions. Those can all be found in the practical, and those can also live alone. And so we're supporting at all stages for all the things. it'd be difficult to be in a conversation with somebody who is interested in end of life planning and says, well, I don't think, for example, when somebody's talking about cremation and they say, well, I don't want to think of myself as burning, or I don't want to think of my body as burning, that suggests to me that there is a separation between themselves and their body, which opens up the larger spiritual conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very practical inquiry, yet it opens up other places for us to go. So it's all in there together.
We do include some humor around my dad's death. We were talking about cremation the other day. I don't know, maybe they had his urn or something like that. And I told my mom I had read something recently about some guy or somebody, it's just some meme that said, I'm going to eat a bunch of popcorn kernels before I die. So when I go into the crematorium, I'm going to give people something to talk about. So we laughed at that. I have a friend, Jake Eagle. He is co-writer of the book, The Power of Awe, but 30-year therapist and just an incredible mentor of mine. And he had he actually died. He was in an accident, died, and then, resuscitated or whatever, but clinically. And that sparked a lot of things around death. And he really got to looking at the emotions at death, but he uses it to help us who are alive. And he says, generally what he finds is we have either a negative emotion. And his question then, to set it up, is what emotion do you think you would have? If right now you got the end of life, what would the emotion? And the negative side, would it be guilt, anger, confusion, longing, or disappointment? Or on the positive side, curiosity, euphoria, or love. Mm. So that's my setup, because he asked me the question and I realized, I think the first one that came to mind was longing. Like, oh, there's still some things I want to do, which to my dad, Alua, when we got the diagnosis and he made the decision, he wasn't really going to fight it. I came to him in the kitchen table on the other side of the room from me and just said, okay, so what's your best? This is it. So what's the real deal? And he said, I've been given it. I've been given. Yeah, I've been given it. And I don't know what's more convicting to my life today. And I am, again, we're recording this on June 18th, 2024. He passed away. He probably said that early July or early January, so yeah, we're looking at 6 months ago. And I can't say that I've unpacked it. I'm grappling with it. Yeah. How's that?
Yeah, that's fair. It's totally understandable. And also kind of the best case scenario, that here we are. I've been given it already. I think that allows us to approach death with surrender, with grace. I think even with some gratitude for the lives that we led, because when we reach that terminus point, there's nothing left. And so if we approach like, I've been given it, I've done it, then wow, what a way to release this life.
Is that a place that it's got to be, again, sobering that you're dealing with this all the time, a constant check for you to go, am I okay today? It sounds morbid to consider your death every day, but then I look at it and I go, well, one, dealing with his took a lot of the fear away. Took a lot of, which, let's hit on that. So here we are in America. I have never experienced a culture around death necessarily. It's just something that's off here and you deal with it when you have to, when somebody dies or when it's you. Otherwise, it's just off here and we really don't want to deal with it. My understanding, the only other experience I've had is with Native American cultures. And I know there it's a much different experience, but then I know, or I've heard, read about other cultures where I almost want to say they celebrate. This is a part, you grow up with it and thus there's not as much fear. How do you see it?
I see it similarly in that in cultures where death is injected into how they're doing life all the time, either by virtue of living in multi-generational homes so that kids are aware that the grandparents or great-grandparents are ill or they're dying or they die in the home, or places where they talk about their dead or they keep their dead close to them, places that aren't as youth obsessed, that value and revere elderhood. in those cultures, I find that their relationship with death is not as thin as it is here.
Yeah.
I think the West, America in particular, has a really, really tense relationship with death. It's a largely death-phobic culture. We push away any notion that I'm not going to be young for forever, that I'm not in perfect health, that I will always have this life as I have it right now. I think largely because we don't have to grapple with a lot of the things that that create the circumstances for us to be with our mortality. You know, I'm not worried about bombs dropping on me all the time. You know, I'm not. Like generally my needs are taken care of. I have a sense of safety in my body, despite this dark brown skin I wear. I'm able to move through the world relatively certain, and I'm using air quotes, that some terrible force isn't going to come and end my life really quick. I have access to good medicine, the medical care system, for as difficult as it can be. Science, technology has made huge strides so that if there was a disease that were to come, I like to believe that it would be treated. There's someday that it won't be. But do you see what I'm saying? That
I do. And it's interesting coming from you, because you actually, different than myself, you have history with a place that is not like this.
Yeah.
Which we didn't, I'll probably put it in the intro, but you come from, Ghana, and you've got a story that you experienced it where it was much more fearful, much less secure. But in that, you're saying, yeah, back there, there wasn't as much fear of death. Does that line up?
I think the way that relationship to mortality differs is that here in the West, it's pushed away, whereas there it's just front and center. For example, I was riding in a cab in Accra, the capital city of Ghana, just a few years ago. And I saw some coffins on the side of the road, and I thought, what on God's green earth? And I asked the cab driver, and he said, oh, right, the coffins are there because this is Mortuary Road. What does that mean? He said, this is the road that leads to the mortuary. And that's what everybody knows it casually as. Of course, there are coffins at the side of the road. There were coffins, different coffin shops all the way down the road. So everybody that's driving down that road, there are homes there, there are businesses there, are driving past and looking at coffins all the time. Now here, you see a funeral home. If you're going there for a particular purpose. And even then, the coffins are in a room behind the lobby room. You know, we have to go and look for the death, whereas there, it's just there for us to see.
With my dad, because it was he's diagnosed, he decided he wasn't going to, it was pretty rampant. I mean, throughout his body. Very little chance that any fighting would make him last much longer, but it probably would have a little bit. And he realized, to add a month or 6 months, but to be going through the process of chemotherapy and all that, and the bad quality of life around that, he didn't want to. So this is it, and we can't cure it. Let's just go with it. Hard for some of us to take initially. And yet then it afforded us to walk with him being pretty cognitive, which in reality, my brother really acted to the best of his knowledge at the time. And what I'm learning, he acted as a death doula, really walking with my dad. And that's where we first got, again, the term, and then came upon you, and helped him stay cognitively fit as much as we could with medications and using some alternative medications and whatnot. And so my kids got to be here with Papa, and they couldn't, weren't going to stay here indefinitely. And we didn't know how long. So at some point the day came for them to fly out. I stayed here, but they flew out and they gave the last hug. And it just, I had no context for it, Alua. I had no, I was able to sit there and just, and I wasn't falling to pieces, but I still wonder, even as I say it, I can feel I'm not the most emotionally intelligent person. I'm working on that too. And I can feel it in me. And I think I still can't quite put the pieces together of saying goodbye while someone is alive in that context. And they did it. I hope it benefits them. I hope it sticks to some point. I'm grateful that they got at least that experience of death. And I hope it, is sobering too, but it also gives them more comfort with it. Cause I do feel, and it's probably not totally fair. Well, I don't know. What would you say? I almost want to discount it a little bit because I don't have that diagnosis, but going through that, I do feel like I don't feel scared of it. I think I second guessed that. Maybe I should, and I'm being naive. What do you think?
No, I don't know. I mean, you said you weren't very emotionally intelligent, but I'm hearing a bunch of things that say that you are, or at least you have a decent amount of like death intelligence, which is the presence of mind to see that it was the last hug that your kids were giving their grandfather. That's massive. Allowing them in that space, allowing them to be with it. That's huge because a lot of people don't, or they pretend it's not happening. They tell the kids that grandpa went to sleep. They don't say the truth of what's going on.
Right.
They pass on the death phobia to their children.
Right.
And so, what I'm hearing is that you had a chance to like get as close to it as you could during the time with your dad.
Yeah.
And you saw the nitty gritty of what that process is like. You heard your dad's decision. It sounds like you all honored it as best as you could.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw what happens when people choose that route instead of choosing the long treatment or, fighting or wishing that it was different. And that was a gift. And it sounds like it's a gift that you have received, as opposed to fighting against. That's massive.
Yes. Yes. Which is why you're on the show. I want to continue pursuing it. And yeah, it sounds terrible. I don't want anyone close to me to die. Please don't. If you're listening to this, if you do, I almost feel like I'm going to ask, can I be present as much as I can? Can I be privy to as much as I can? I would love to, for more people to let it be documented, I guess, let it be a part. And yeah, if you happen to, so I'll invest in the company that you start that's doing that, that's saying, hey, if you want to be privy, we've got somebody who's willing to be fairly public and just give some daily updates of their thought process. And you get some context on them and to see them and hear them and feel them walk through the process ongoing. I mean, I know we've got, there's the rare book out there that goes through somebody's, death, but like a reality show to hear different people, different ages, different genders, different backgrounds, different feelings. And like you said, some that are different emotions, because the one that I'm used to hearing, if there's any, is just regret. So we figure that that's it. You get the death diagnosis and it is regrets. So, I'll put that to you.
Yeah.
Is that very frequent? Are there always some regrets? Are there sometimes not, more or less? What do you find on average?
I think similarly, it depends on how the person moved through their life. If there was somebody that moved through with a constant, I should have done this, I should have done that, then they're going to do the same about their life when they're nearing the end. But if there's somebody who has been able to just accept their life for what it's been and reconcile as it's going along, not so much. Yet there are a few buckets, I think, of some regrets that pop up often. And one of them is about how their time was spent. People regretting how they spent their time, either spending too much time at work or too little time pursuing the things that they really want to do. People that regret not living authentically for whatever that may mean, either being with the person that they loved or how they express themselves in their body or being nice and kind when they really felt like a raging. And so regret about living authentically or not. So that's another major one. And so regrets fall in those like kind of categories around how they spent their time, what they allowed to just move through them, and the things that they really got stuck on that maybe didn't matter so much to them. I find people in regret about grudges, sometimes the grudges that they held, or how they approached their relationships, what they allowed to live in their relationships, or the things that they didn't say, their apologies or their thank yous or their I'm sorries. Those are the major categories of regret. But, I find most people have a little bit of something, but some have none.
Tell me about the living authentically piece. A lot of people, I put it in my book. So many people have referenced Bronnie Ware, where is she from? Australia, I think, the palliative care nurse, and she wrote the book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the, I wish I had let myself be happy. I wish some of those things we hear that the regrets more of what someone didn't do than what they actually did. But I'm interested, you mentioned before, just kind of, laughed about your own personality. You don't read a room well sometimes, and you're just kind of out there. But can we say that that's something you're at peace with because you found the health and wellness of letting yourself be you. Tell me about that. Tell me about that first. I got a follow-up question.
Yeah. I think part of, and I wrote about this too, is my journey into death care is I started my professional life as a lawyer, working at legal aid,
Yeah.
doing work that was great ultimately, but wasn't really good for me. It wasn't really a match for who I was. And that ended up in a clinical depression, a major depressive episode that was utterly crippling. And from some distance, and even while I was in it, could see that that was the consequence of me living inauthentically. That I had forced myself into a box so small that could never ever contain like the wholeness of who I am, but was trying really hard. That everything inside me was just like, it was like a 5 alarm system trying to get me to wake up to get out of this. To me, the consequence of living inauthentically is major clinical depression, a major depressive episode. And that's not a price I'm willing to pay. I would much rather allow myself to be super sensitive and to understand that sometimes I lack tact, and that I would much rather have conversations about death and the stars and aliens than I would small talk, even though small talk sometimes is necessary. And when I allow myself to to have the grace to be who I am for exactly as I am, perfectly as I am, I think it allows me to, first of all, live authentically, and next, to be able to reach the end of my life knowing that I just was who I was. My authenticity, my uniqueness is a crucial element of my life. I've been born at this particular time in Ghana to these parents, the second of four, at a particular time in the world, to live this way. Let me shine that light as brightly as I can. I don't want to regret not having done that. It's unique.
Yeah. So let me again still dig in there as you look at the people that you have walked with as a death doula, and on this aspect of maybe regrets or some level of regrets for not being the fullness of themselves, living authentically. How do you see that most come out? Is it, I spent too much time worrying about what other people thought and not being myself. I worried too much about offending people. I didn't spend enough time encouraging people. I don't know. We can go on different ways. Where have you found that to most come out?
You got it
How?
all. Those are the major ones, but also living for societal expectations.
Okay.
That society tells me that this is who I'm supposed to be, or the careers that are supposed to bring me joy, or living for metrics like money and accomplishments rather than the things that actually make us feel happy to be doing the thing that we're doing. Because I think a lot of people recognize getting closer to the end of their lives that the things that they were told that were supposed to bring them fulfillment in life ultimately didn't. That they may have been fulfilled by thinking that other people were proud of them or thought that they were a good human for that, but that ultimately didn't matter. I find that mostly in 2 categories: about people's work and about their children, how they showed up for their kids, how they didn't show up for their kids, who they were supposed to be as parents as opposed to who they really wanted to be. And those are heavy things to carry. The number of people that have shared with me some regret about how they're showing up as parents is stunning. I've heard many women say that while they love their children, they don't love mothering. I wrote about this in a chapter of the book where there was a client who shared about her regrets around not having her children be at the center of her life. And please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that kids shouldn't be. If you are somebody that feels that way and feels good about that, then by all means, I support it. And yet there are many that don't feel that way, but don't feel the safety or the capacity to say so, because societally we're not supposed to think that way.
Well, we can go down that road, Alua.
Uh-oh.
I have 9 children.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. That's another show. But I have 9 children. They're not they're not the center of my life. And I've even matter of fact, I to be candid, I texted or emailed back and forth with a listener today, who was sharing some heartfelt feelings about being a mother and family and whatnot. And I, just to commiserate, shared that, here I am at 53. Most of my friends have kids that are older and take care of themselves, if not empty nesters. And I still have kids at home. We recently had a couple of grandkids who had the need to stay with us for a while. And they're, let's see, they were 7 and 10. And I'm kind of tired of that level of parenting. And, even that, nine kids. Oh, you must be that kind of person who just, parenting is your life. No, we were just driving fast. That's that's the show's called What Drives You. I was just driving fast, man. I wasn't counting the cost here, so God bless them. Do I regret them? No, but I have some frustrations. I look at it and go, I didn't count the cost. And so even that, you saying, being honest with your feelings, because I can't change that. I can't negative a kid. Even if I had one pass away, they were still a part of my life, and they still always will be. And I don't want to, but to be honest with that, that's so interesting. I never would have pulled that out. I've not ever heard that. So you're saying a lot of people have, well, I don't know if you said it as regrets, but they question their I don't know, what would you say? They're concerned about their parenting.
Yeah. About how they're showing up as parents, because we hear that the kids are supposed to be everything,
Yeah.
I hear you have 9 kids and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like a lot of children. And at the same time,
Yeah.
that how people show up to their parenthood, how they show up to like their relationship to their kids. A lot of people are sharing a lot of like, not regret necessarily, but rather the desire to not have that be defining who they are and how they spend their time while they're alive.
Yeah.
And it's something that we're told often, particularly people with uteruses, about how we're supposed to care for them. I have chosen not to birth and not to like have children in that way. And that brings a lot of judgment as well. And
that's okay. I had enough to cover you. You're good.
Thank you. Yes, we can split. I mean, still, we could find another one, then we split it amongst all of us, right?
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. But like that in and of itself, that choice in and of itself brings a lot of judgment. But that belongs to other people. If I was living for them, I probably would have gone ahead and done it, and then maybe found myself in a boat where this wasn't really what I wanted to do with my time, my life, my uterus, etc. Yeah, it's coming up a lot. I'm surprised.
Really interesting. I'll probably come back to you with that at a later date as parenting issues come up, because it matters to me now. I have very different views on parenting now than I did way back when. And I look at parents now and I do question, honestly, gosh, this is going down a rabbit trail, but we'll just do that. I'll blame it on you. That, I look at people, and I question more like, what are you having kids for? Is it just kind of got enamored with it like a puppy? And do you really know, this is like going into business together. You really want to do that? You really want to devote? And one of the bigger ones too, Alua, was some of our closest friends do not have kids. And so we're culturally supposed to think, oh, poor them. They didn't get to experience the miracle of life and yet, and walking with them for now 20 years, what I've realized is there are some significant things in my life that they haven't got to experience. True story.
Yeah.
And there's some things, I got a whole list of things that they've experienced that I won't.
Yeah.
I put my time and investment elsewhere, and I look and go, man, they sewed into some people's lives and they experienced some things, and it helped form them into humans. And I was over here changing diapers and taking kids to soccer and whatnot. Really set me back, because what you're talking about, the cultural perspectives on parenting. Yeah, I held them. I was part of that religion.
Strong. It is. It feels like one.
Yeah.
It feels like one. And I have to say that when I look at my own life, I'm 46 now. The time has passed, and I'm grateful because now I don't have to stress out every month about whether or not I'm pregnant. And I don't know that my career, my business would have grown as it has if I was also raising children. In that way, I have time to commit to these things. I'm pleased with my choice. I wonder if there will ever be a sense of regret, but right now, no, not at all. Yet I hear it so often from folks as they're getting close to the end of their lives, as they really start to think about their death. Like, did I spend a lot of time doing this thing that maybe wasn't as important to me as I thought it was, or rather because I felt like I had to? It shows up in
And
a lot of ways.
yeah, and I imagine we'll all be there because I can
Yeah.
look at it and go, gosh, what would have been like? What would I have been able to do if I had not had kids, or if I'd only had two, like a normal person, or whatever? And there it is. There's a list of pros and cons for everything. I'm going to pull out a couple lines from the book,
Okay.
Alua. You talk about build a life. These are quotes from you. Build a life that you feel comfortable leaving. That's what my dad did. I saw him. That was convicting. It has changed the trajectory of his kids. There's three of us and my mom. And we are looking at life differently. And the walls are bare behind me. She is moving. She's going to go to a new chapter of life. And we have all really come back and looked at, would we be living a life that we're comfortable leaving? Another quote: if they sense the immediacy of life, the preciousness of it, what would they be doing differently right now? That's the hallelujah chorus on this one. If we sense the immediacy, and we play with this, but I feel like it's almost impossible. And again, it brings me back to, that's why I would love to, I think I would have the opportunity to be present with death more, because otherwise it's so difficult to do. We can't live like it's the last day, because if it's the last day, I'm not showering or paying the mortgage. And at some point, if it's not the last day, I got to do those things. So we can't do that. But what do we set it out? If I lived 6 months, if I lived a year, that's just, until it really happens, it feels almost impossible. I want that reminder. And yet that's where it does feel like a weighty, tragic privilege that you have. Yeah, I would almost. Yeah, I feel so pushy. I want this from you. I would love to hear. Can we have an anonymous? If you're not doing this already, but anonymous, daily or weekly blog or a podcast. What a great podcast! And to hear, this is my recent experience. I walk with this, like the stories in your book. I just read the one about it was somebody, and I'm sure it's a made up name, but it was Mike. And it was incredible. Page is literally, I wrote down page 116. He said, I gave up being angry about today because of yesterday, a long time ago. That's a show right there. I need to hear that every week, if not every day.
Yeah. It is available for us all the time. It's available for us all the time. I think because of my work, because I get to be around people all the time, that it feels really present. But also sometimes when I look in the mirror, when I'm not in judgment about gray or lines or dark circles or so, and I can just be with my body for this very, very mortal skin that I live in, and I can feel into tissues and blood and bone and recognize that this little meat suit at some point, probably far sooner than I'm ready for, is going to be tired and be ready to die, then it allows me to be with that mortality. And yeah, not in the way that it is when you are faced with a diagnosis. When we're imagining it, it's ephemeral, Yet when every day I can inject a little bit of mortality into my day by looking in the mirror and saying, oh, aging is happening one day closer. 1 minute
One day
closer.
closer. Okay, you mentioned the meat suit, so let's go down that road. My parents live in an affluent, gated Florida community with primarily older people. A lot of them older than they were, and they have a health club down the road. They got their own compound, health club and whatever. So I'll go down there. I'll walk over there, run over there, and go in. The majority of the people, there's some fit people in there. Well, you can just see it's very acute. You've either got the person over here who's obviously been active and moving all their life, and they're doing, yoga or Zumba or whatever they are, working out with a trainer, and they're going at it. Playing tennis, you've got that crowd. And then it feels very stark. You've got the other crowd, and it's the person who obviously did not. They were sedentary, and now they're doing what they can to maintain any amount of movement. And it's so difficult. So very convicting that, again, me being here, I would figure that's, again, magnified significantly with your experiences and gives you a lot of motive to maintain your meat suit. Fair?
Not quite. On some
No?
level.
Tell me.
On some level, I exercise more because of my mental health and sleep. And I love it. Like, I love to breathe hard and regulate my breath while I'm running or on a bike or something. It just makes
Yeah.
me so happy. Because I also see very many people that really want to live and have worked really, really hard and are in really great shape that are still dying from things when they're young. You know, I'll never forget when I was, I don't know, maybe like 21 or so, and Flojo died.
Yeah.
Now, Flojo was a major athlete, somebody who all of us would say probably was in top health, and then she dropped dead. And there are a number of things that we can't tell, we can't see. I do
Yeah.
think that exercising and taking care of the body has some impact on maybe how we're able to interact with disease when it's time. And yet I see plenty of folks in top condition that still get walloped with a massive diagnosis and then are in this exact same boat.
Yeah, I really just don't want to hear that. We'll bleep that out of the show. I want, I want to tell. Is it not in reality? Then is it not one of the? I'm trying to think back to Bronnie Ware's book of regrets. Is it not one that comes up much of? Oh, I wish I had taken care of myself better.
I do hear that.
Oh,
I
do
do
you?
hear that. And
Okay.
then at the same time, people who have taken excellent care of themselves
Yeah.
with ALS, you know, folks
Yeah.
that maybe strongly identified with what their body was able to do physically, like their strength and their virility and all that, still be reduced and then having to struggle, work that much harder. I mean, I find, or I hope, I encourage people to exercise because you're enjoying it and not because you hope that at some point it's going to save you from some fate. None of us know.
Yeah.
You know, you could get hit by a bus on your run. Like, you
Yeah.
know, do it because you like it. Do it because it
Yeah.
feels good to you.
Well, that I can attest to. I would like it to help at the end of life as well. Let me ask on the same concept of spirituality. You mentioned that before. How do you see that? How does that play out at end of life? Do you look at that and find that it is a weightier issue to people that they have? I don't know if I want to say, does it come into regrets and they wish they had pursued that more, or does it come into just how they are able to manage the end of life and the fear around it?
I think the latter,
Okay.
although I'll say that even the most religious amongst us, I've noticed still question. There's been just a couple people I've met in my work that are like, I know exactly what's happening when I die, and I'm gonna meet Jesus, or I'm going to finally be with Allah, or something of the sort. It's only few people. It seems like most people question whether or not their beliefs are true
Mm.
because a belief is just a belief. There's no evidence for it while we're living when there's evidence and it becomes a fact, and they're soon about to get evidence when they die. And so, of course, there's some questions that come up around it. But I think that sometimes it allows people something to hang on to through treatment for disease, you know,
Yeah.
hope and faith. Yet it can also be damaging when we are holding on to somebody, something to cure us, and that cure doesn't come because then a belief system is also shattered or is questioned and has to be reconfigured. When you're, you know, what kind of a God would allow me to experience this pain, the God that I've been faithful to this entire time, and now here I am, do I still believe? It's tricky.
Well, so I'll ask you. I mean, here was you at your, however many years ago. Then your experience with death with your friend Peter, right?
My brother-in-law.
And okay, yeah, and now coming forward, how has it influenced the trajectory of your own faith?
I think what's happened is that I've gotten um, more willing to consider all possibilities. You know,
Hmm.
I grew up an evangelical Christian. My parents were missionaries, and so there was just a one way of looking at life and faith beforehand. And then once I started to open up my perspectives, I saw anything was possible, and yet some things seemed more possible than others. When Peter, 43 years old, my brother-in-law, who I adored, was diagnosed with Burkitt's lymphoma, I found myself praying for the first time in earnest. When I was a kid and we had to pray, I just closed my eyes and like pray for cake or something. And now when Peter's 43, I'm 34, wishing that something would come and save him. And then it didn't. It helped me. It had me question what I believed. And now I believe in really the absolute sovereign timing of death and of life, that things happen absolutely as they will. And my job is to adapt as
Hmm.
quickly, as effortlessly as I can.
I'll ask a question that I don't have many people who I can, because they're not experiencing in a death. But I had who's become a friend now, but a guy on the show, Jordan Grummett. He's a doc that became a palliative care doc, and he wrote a book called Taking Stock. And I asked him, it wasn't part of his message necessarily, but I think it just came up in the show. Well, it normally does with me because I'm interested in spirituality, and asked him about that. And he said he left his faith. He grew up with it, but became a doc. He was about science, didn't really have a place for it. And then time goes on, he becomes a palliative care doctor, and he's with people as they take their last breath. And he said, Kevin, one of the most profound aspects of my spirituality, he said, was that when people take that last breath and then it's over, he said, something leaves. Something leaves. He says, I can't tell you what, but he says it's just a foundation. He doesn't ascribe to a certain religion or whatnot, but something leaves. I'm curious about your experience.
Same. It is impossible to deny the existence of something when from one breath to the next, the body is animated by something. And then in the space of a breath, it's gone. Much like scientists, doctors, nobody can find the pinprick of time when conception actually occurs. I've heard that there's a spark that's seen under a microscope, but they don't know if that spark is zinc and magnesium, I think, or a chemical reaction, or nobody knows what that spark actually is. I think similarly, when life leaves, it's that same intangible unknown. It is utterly awe-inspiring in like the real way. Like, what is this? How? It's hard not to be incredibly humbled, and also really, really grateful that whatever animates us is still animating me.
Thank you. That's profound to me. And I'll admit that I had hoped to have an experience with my dad's last breath. And again, if it's okay with you, I'll keep using that word of the privilege that you have of being with people during that time. It feels like it would be that way. And I only experienced his, and maybe experiencing it more times has helped you to realize what you just shared. Because my one experience, I didn't. I wanted something supernatural. I wanted some feeling. His death, it was kind of ugly at the end, in all truth. It feels like his spirit left a couple of days before, and we were just dealing with this hemorrhaging body, to be graphic. And then when it happened, along with that, it was just fairly ugly and felt like he wasn't even there. And then two, my own emotions around it was my dad. Maybe it would have been different, and I could have been present in a different way if it was somebody else who I was helping. I did not experience that. So it kept me with that feeling of, gosh, I bet there's something I didn't experience happening here.
Yeah. I'll say that, well, a couple of things. First, that desire to have experienced something that you didn't, and feeling something about it, is also an experience of grief. It didn't go one way and you wish it would have, but it didn't. So now what? Like wanting that. So that's, I think, largely your grief talking. And next, that the experience that I'm talking about is present and possible across the life cycle, no matter when the death is occurring and how it's occurring. I think even in the ways when we think of like bad deaths, yeah. And I'll use hit by a bus again, although that's a good death for some people. But for me, it's not one that I would prefer. There's been several people that say that they'd rather just get hit by a bus, have no idea that it's coming. Yeah. And yet when something happens in that way, life was there and then it wasn't. Something happened in between where this body was capable, talking, eating, engaging, conscious, and then gone. And that person then makes no new memories, speaks no more words, is no longer engaged in life in this way. And that can still inspire awe, even if the death were violent, even when the death occurs in all these ways. I still experience that, even with all these images that we've been seeing lately, of folks in war, and we're seeing these bodies, and I feel so much awe that they lived. You know, I'm saddened and heartbroken by the way that they're dying, but I'm also like, wow, that's somebody's son. That was somebody's sibling. That's somebody who had likes and dislikes. That's somebody who had a particular tone to their voice.
Yeah.
And we won't hear that again. And that to me is awe-inspiring, truly.
What has it done then for your own perspective on, I'll start with not even your death, but on a loved one, looking and going, okay, here you have people in your life that are very dear to you. You're very attuned to mortality and the fact that they could be gone at any moment, hit by a bus or a terminal illness. And of course you care. And of course you would shed a tear. And it's afforded you also the grace to not be devastated by it. Is that? No? Tell
Still
me.
quite devastated. I was telling you, I have a friend right now who has a serious diagnosis. I'm devastated. I'm devastated.
Okay.
I think what it affords me is the capacity to allow myself to have the full range of human emotions, which is anger at the injustice for my friend, even though I know also that death is sovereign in its timing. Yet I am like, that's okay. I'm experiencing this right now. I'm human. I get to be angry. I get to be sad. I get to be frustrated. I talk so much about death and dying. Yeah, I'm really saddened thinking about my parents dying. I'll probably be the one tearing at the sheets and cursing out doctors and stuff, even though I'm here talking about how we die all the time. I think what it does, it gives me compassion for myself and for others. For their
Okay. No, I hear that. I accept that. So it's not feeling it less. Would you say then, I'm fishing here, obviously. Would you say it though gives you the ability to and or faith in that you will be resilient and it's not going to take you out either?
Maybe on some level, but I think depression did that more than being what death and dying has. Because grief is a taken out type of experience, you know? And in it, I'm still like, I'm grieving. I get to grieve. It just gives me a lot more grace for myself. It gives me a lot more grace for other humans. It allows me to let humans be humans, mostly. But then also allows me to have a lot of judgment for how some humans are sometimes, and give myself grace for having my judgment as well.
That's an interesting statement. I thought you were going to come in. Well, and you probably include it. Well, I'll ask you in saying, okay, I'm going to let people be human, but got boundaries. Fair?
Yeah, I have boundaries for sure.
Yeah.
I most definitely do. You can be human over there.
Okay. Thank you for that. One of the questions, I don't know if this came, if I pasted this out of the book, Alua, or if I just wrote it as I was reading it, but why do we avoid thinking about dying? Why do you find that the average person is so reticent to talk about dying? Because it's easy to say, it seems like, oh, it's just because we fear death. But is it something different? Is it something of having to, it's like looking in the mirror, having to come to grips with ourselves? Or why is it? What do you think?
A number of things, but what seems most prevalent is that most of us think of ourselves as the center of the story. And of course, science says that I'm center of the universe. It comes from this point out. However, there are 8 billion of us at this current moment, that the experience that I am having is a singular one out of 8 billion. It's not the most important one. And to think of that snuffing out seems impossible. Like mine is the most important because it is mine.
Yeah.
And similar yours and everybody else's. It makes us feel powerless. It makes us feel inadequate. It makes us feel helpless. It makes us feel not as important as we think we are. And the ego is very fragile. I think when folks do a lot of work in identifying their ego as just an expression of the way that they move out there in the world, and maybe cultivate a sense of themselves outside of the egoic sense of self, it allows a lot more grace to say, hey, one day this will die, one day this experience will die, and it will continue on in my absence.
So I asked your feelings of death in regards to losing somebody else. So let me just turn it then back on you too then. And how has it changed or continues to change your own, the fear of death? Do you look at that and go, oh, well, I've dealt with it so much, so no, I don't fear it? Or you go, no, I absolutely do, or fear, maybe that's a wrong word. What is the emotion that you feel towards it now?
I have some concerns. I have some like, oh man, I wouldn't like that so much. I recently had a surgery and I realized I was scared. I had some anxiety about anesthesia. And when I sat with it long enough, the fear was that I wouldn't come back from it. And I didn't want that to happen yet because there are things I still wanted to do. It was about a month before my book came out, and I wanted to live long enough to see my book out there in the world. I want to watch my niece and my nephew grow up. I want to grow old with my partner. I want to watch him as he goes fully gray. I mean, he's working on a really hot salt and pepper thing now, but when he's fully gray, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. So I would really like to experience that,
Yeah.
and the idea of not getting that makes me sad. That's in the category, the fear of death or the fear of missing out. Our fears of death fall in about 5 or so major categories. Would you like me to share?
Yes, please.
Okay. So one of them that I just talked about is the fear of missing out, the straight up FOMO, like life continuing on in my absence, without me being present for it.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is about the fear of the process of the body. Is it going to be painful? What is dying going to feel like? What disease am I going to get? What's going to happen to this body? Another one of the major ones is what, if anything, happens after I die, the spiritual concerns, which is closely tied in with the fear of the unknown, not knowing what happens after we die, but also not being able to answer the basic questions about my dying, like when is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? Like, why is it happening? All that stuff. Another one is around our fear of loss of control. Like, I have no control unless I choose. Unless I choose the circumstances of my death, I will have no control over when that happens. And lastly, and I think this is the one that most people have some element of, which is a fear of a life not fully lived, which sounds often like, I can't die yet because I still have to blah, 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 blah. Or people not living authentically. Or, just having dreams that are still far away that they're not doing anything about. Because I feel like folks that are working toward it generally have a little bit of peace about the steps that they're making. But when they are just holding it out there like something I want to do, and they're scratching and sniffing in the meantime and nothing's happening, that can create a paralyzing fear of death as well.
You reminded me of the quote, and I don't know, Oliver Wendell Holmes. That's it. The one of the aspect, maybe you know it, of being afraid or people dying with their music still in them.
Yes.
Is that along in those parameters?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But just to take it one step further are you starting to write the song or not? Because the folks that have started to write the song, I feel like, are getting closer. And so that fear can be assuaged in a way. Yet the folks that just still say that they want to sing it, but aren't singing it, aren't doing anything to get them any closer. That's a really, really tricky one. I see a lot of those people that always wished but never did anything about it. In this way, our death can be a motivator. Our mortality can be a motivator. And not in the hustle culture, go, 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 do, get way, but rather in the way that, well, I don't want to die with the song still on my heart, so let me sing it.
Okay, I was right going there. You talked about the doing, which you talk about. It's page 76 of your book. On my notes here is, going from doing to being. That when is that a lot of your call for your message right now? We're all out here and we're all doing. We're doing the job. We're doing the grind. We're doing the stuff. We're working out. We're doing the do. And yet, when we, as you participate in death, bring you back. I mean, obviously it's in the book. We're talking about it now that you're bringing us back to saying, we got to do some, but the movement from doing, again, I'll just ask you about your own evolution. You say, here was Alua over here doing, and now that you've experienced death, how much, I don't know if you can put it on a category or a percentage, but how much do you go through the day and go, you know what, I'm being drawn to the doing, but I'm not going to violate my being, my aspect of being?
What I try to think of now is, who am I being while I'm doing?
Okay. Okay.
Where is the joy? Where is the presence? Where is the presence? Where is the authenticity? How much of myself am I being while I still got to do a decent amount of doing. I'm running a business. I'm teaching death doulas. I'm still talking about this book. I'm maybe working on another one, maybe work on a show. Like there's a lot of doing that's happening as well. But who am I being while I'm doing it? Am I making space for presence? Am I making space for joy? Am I making space to, look you in the eye and be like really curious about who you are? When I'm in line at CVS and I see the cashier, when the cashier is having a tough day and I get to the front and they've made it hell for everybody else in line, right? Can I just be present with them?
Yeah.
Look them in the eye, take my deep breath so I'm not also triggered by the way that they're behaving. That's my ideal.
I mean, with that, we know, the aspect of being present is very, oh gosh, I don't want to minimize it, but it's like a fad right now. I mean, it's getting a lot of focus. How great. And I've been reading on my own, studies, how much of our own human evolving and our brain is able to, unlike other animals, to think about the past and to think about the future. And that's great. And yet that is, for some reason, that concept is helping it be more relevant for me, that right now I'm here and I'm having an awesome conversation with you. I'm talking about something that matters for my life. The things that we're talking about and I'm sitting here taking notes about are going to help me the rest of my life. They're going to help my kids. I'm going to put this out. Tens of thousands of people are going to listen to it. We don't know the ripple effects of that. I'm here right now. I can take away from that by sitting here and considering worries in the future, or even the fun stuff. Like I do really care about what's for dinner because I like food. So, but let's put that off here. And can I be here right now? And then thinking about the past and thinking about, gosh, the last show I did, I don't know, whatever. And it robs us. So I imagine, would that come back into not only your own journey, obviously, but again, the regrets in essence that you would find from people. So I just wish I had been right there, realizing the sunset.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But also a step further, this is where the privilege lies, right? The capacity to actually be able to do that. Not only to experience the sunset because it's something beautiful that we gaze upon, but when the things are difficult, can I also feel the wind on my skin? Can I experience myself blinking or taste a little bit of food that I still had in my mouth? Like to be in this body to the extent that it feels safe to be. That is also a practice of presence. I feel, or at least what I think I'm seeing more, is that people who have cultivated a greater sense of presence in their life are able to reach the end of it with a teensy, weensy bit more grace. Because while I'm here, while I'm embodied, I can appreciate the miracle that this is and also recognize that at some point I've got to put it down. And so while I'm here, wow, let me look how white that white bedsheet is. Or what's the texture of this curtain? Or what emotion is Kevin struggling with at this moment? Like all that allows me to be present in my life too.
The word that just came to mind as you were saying that is curious. Fair?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the things that makes a really powerful death doula is somebody who's endlessly curious about humans and the human condition.
Well, you said death doula, but I'm thinking what makes an interesting person. We're not sitting here in death, but to talk with you and have you consider and be thoughtful about the questions I ask and about that makes you, I want to be that. I'm not a death doula, but I want to be that.
Yeah. On some level too, this conversation is about our mortality, but I think like most conversations are about our mortality, when we're talking about the things that we want to create, or as you're scheduling podcast guests, or we're constantly thinking about the things that we're putting out there in the world. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, said that all art is an expression of mortality or of love, like at all times, because in some way it's a creation of something that I will leave after I die. It's a creation of something born out of like my being here for right now. And the recognition that one day that will end allows me to make the thing that feels like the most G expression of myself right now. and then I'll die, and that will stay, you know?
Yes. And I'm listening to the context here, and I keep thinking about the full range of emotions. Is that okay? That's you. I could sense that from you. So you're a person who does that. You are emotive to a degree. You let yourself be, and you could say that, oh, that's part of your, part of your personality. But to take it over here to death and we'll call it regrets or just desires, I almost feel, and I'm asking you if it's people. I wish I had felt. Maybe that's the question. I wish I had felt more. Is that fair?
I've certainly heard that before. I wish I hadn't stuffed so much of it. I wish I just allowed myself to cry, or I wish I just allowed myself to be sad, or, I wish I hadn't stuffed all of my joy with anxiety also. But then at the same time, when we're in that state, I think that we're healing something, we're rallying against something, there's some necessity of that expression at the time. And so if we can also give ourselves grace for that. But I certainly hear people wishing that they'd felt more, wishing that they'd allowed themselves to feel more.
And along with that, again, in my own notes I'm writing here, I wrote down, I feel like I hear you saying too, you're just not as happy, but you want to feel the negative too. This isn't just to feel the positive and the rainbows and the sunshine, but it's to feel it all.
Yeah, the rainbows and the sunshine only last briefly. Life is a full range of stuff. There's a lot of sadness, there's insecurity, there's doubt, there's fear, there's all of that. And all of that is part of the humanness that one day we'll put down. And so I want to do it all. There's certain faith traditions or spiritual practices that have us allow things to like move in and wash through. And the impermanence of it all, I find really, really useful to say, this is what I'm experiencing now. And that will pass, and that will pass. And then there's others that look at it from a removed perspective that just kind of allow it to exist over here. But I wish that we could also be in it while it's happening, not just be like watching it happen, but like feeling it.
You said impermanence. Do you hold things more lightly now?
I do. It's part of why I call the book briefly Perfectly Human.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all just like melting like snowflakes in my hand.
Tell me then about how we can better be there for people in our lives who are at the end of life, whether it's a elderly parent, whether it is my 20-year-old buddy who just got hit by a car and is in the hospital and isn't going to make it, or middle-aged person who got the diagnosis and there's an impending death. How can we be there? Because it feels like myself and everybody, we feel completely incompetent. And tell us, help me.
Well, on some level we are, because we don't have much death intelligence built into our systems. We don't allow ourselves a lot of space to feel the full range of things. And so we always want to focus on the things that are like positive or good or healthy, as opposed to thinking about the things that are also really difficult, like a 20-year-old that gets hit by a car, that's difficult to be with. It's important that I think that we acknowledge how difficult it is for ourselves. Like, this is hard. This is hard. And yet to show up for your friend means to make space for your friend to be in his experience, or whoever it is that you're supporting to be in their experience, and to hold them there, not to ask them to only focus on the positive or to hope for healing, but rather at this moment, you are scared that this is going to end your life. And I can understand why.
Yeah.
I can understand why, and allow them to have that. Now that means that when I'm hearing that from my friend, I get to turn to my other friends and say, I'm pissed and I'm sad and I'm frustrated. I don't put it on my friend. I make space for him to have his experience and his emotions as best as I can, and then turn to the people that support me to have mine over there. What I wrote about was, it's really important that we show up and shut up. We show up for them. We allow them to be exactly where they are without our desire to try to fix it or make it better. There's no fixing the pain of grief or loss or death. We can't. we feel powerless. And so we try to make it better somehow, but that sometimes makes it worse. And so let's just allow them to be where they are, to allow our humans to be human.
That's what I was looking for, is that, we can't make it better. And even I've been getting counseled recently on the context of witnessing, just to be with someone and witness them. We don't need to validate them or build them up or blow sunshine up their butt or whatever, but just to be there and witness it. It's really called me to, when somebody, they may not be dying, but they are sharing something hard, that how to be supportive and how to witness them. That's what I hear from you.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. I think it's really profound medicine to allow a human being to have their experience for exactly what it is, not the parts that I understand or not the parts that I necessarily agree with, but for what they are experiencing at that moment, recognizing that may also change, just to witness them in their humanness. That is a call toward compassion. And I believe that that's really the most healing the presence on the planet. Like, I don't think that we'd be in half of the nonsense, the political, the oppression, if we could honor the humanness in the other. There's no way to be dropping bombs when you also see the people that are going to be the recipient of them as humans.
Yeah.
And if so, then there's something seriously wrong.
You, in reading this book, this was last week when I was going through it, and I was thinking about, because you do talk about just the nuts and bolts, in essence, of having your affairs in order and how to take care of that. And I had this thought of, we look at annual goals. It's New Year's, you're going to do your annual goals. Do I do an annual, death preparation, or just are my affairs in order? If I go, it does seem, I saw that with my dad, and even though he had some time and they thought, we did some estate planning and we did that, and then he even had some time. Oh my gosh, it left a lot of things in his wake of having to deal with it. My mom, and actually it's my sister and brother-in-law who dealt with a lot of that. And it got me to thinking about, it's not an out of the question thing to revisit every year and go, if something happens this year, let's get everybody up to speed so you know what's going on. Is that something you look at?
A+, Kevin. I love the idea. A+. I also think that there are a set of documents that we should be looking at consistently, like our advanced planning documents, our advanced directives, the things that state out who will make our decisions for us if we can't, and the type of treatment we want to receive for life support, if any at all. And we look at that consistently at major life events. Annually is wonderful. I also suggest birthdays, because it's probably no surprise to you that every year I live, I'm like, wow, I made it to another one. I'm not dead yet. But also, like, when we move, or when a parent dies, or when we get a new job, or, get divorced, or any major life events, we're constantly looking at these documents as well, because they're intended to live with us. But that also brings a little spot of mortality into your day today.
Yeah. And thinking about, if I did, how many of the passwords, the maintenance for my life and our family and whatnot are just in my head, or they're somewhere where nobody knows. That's what it got me thinking about. And I thought, oh my gosh, the stuff that would be, even if the big stuff, the house is willed to whatever, and there's some estate planning, just the little stuffs of who takes care of what would be, that's it adds insult to injury, right? It's one thing to deal with a dead person or somebody who died, and then second, to have this wreckage.
Yeah, it's salt in the wound.
Yeah.
And I often think when people say, oh, it doesn't matter what you do with my stuff or my body or whatever, because I'll be dead anyway, I think that's okay. I can understand. And at the same time, that means that you're leaving people that care about you, who are going to be deeply grieving your death anyway, to then also have to deal with all this bureaucracy. That just seems really unfair. It's a great act of love to do some proper end-of-life planning to get our affairs in order as best as we can, because we can't get it all down. Let's just do our best. I think of this often, how much information it takes to run my life, and how much of it just lives in my head, meaning that when I die, it will die with me. People won't know my quirky little habits and tricks for where I keep the important documents in my life until I tell them.
Yeah.
And if I don't, then when I die, they're going to be struggling.
I'm going to flip a question
Okay.
or not a question, but flip a concept that I shared earlier that I hadn't thought about till now. Looking at the emotion, I told you my buddy, Jake Eagle, the emotions at death, and asking, if I died right now, what would I feel? Would I feel guilt, anger, confusion, longing, disappointment, or curiosity, euphoria, love? Let me take it to because you're also dealing not just with a person and dying, but their loved ones who are right there with you. And it may be one spouse, it may be 10 family members, who knows, that you're dealing with during the process and then the aftermath. And I'm thinking, even there, what could I have in mind to give my family so that when I die, they are at peace? We are at peace with each other. What can I do? I mean, you want to say, try to your affairs, make things right with people. It's such a flippant thing to say, but really, what do you see there that's a common, and let me go to the negative side. What do you see that, man, somebody dies and you often see anger, or you see, the regrets of the living, my guess is what I'm looking at.
One of the major things I see is when people have not been in conversation about their care at the end of life, because then people are arguing about life support decisions or too much morphine or not enough morphine, or people are just like angry about how the medicine was used at the end. That causes a lot of fighting. It's rarely about, I mean, it is also about the possessions and the money, but it's often about the care that their person received. And so I think it's really important for us to think about that. I also think that to the extent that we can, and we touched on this briefly, but to make sure that like your family is in order, that any necessary conversations that really need to occur are occurring while you're still cognizant enough to have them, so that we can make space for the you hurt me's and I'm sorry's or please forgive me's or whatever it is that we need to say, because that ends up causing really deep foundational cement type wounds if we don't address them when we can. I think that's really important. But lastly, I'll also say, you shared about this earlier when talking about your father. We teach people how to do it based on how we did it. And I think for a parent in particular, a parent is still, teaching in some capacity, even though you're a full grown adult and your siblings are as well. But what I've heard is that your dad taught you plenty about how to approach the end of life based on how he did it.
Yeah.
Now, if you can leave in a manner that leaves something powerful, useful for your children, all 9 of them, that will be a tremendous gift. Yes, your affairs would be great. Yes, your will would be amazing. Yes, have all
Yeah.
the conversations. Also, if you can approach the end with grace and dignity, the best way that you can, that would be tremendous.
Yeah. You have this, maybe it's just the exposure of my, biblical background and raising up, and the idea of this blessing at the end, of life. And I think I didn't really need it because of the way he lived. I felt that, we did have a day, and I'm so interested in what you said earlier as I was talking about that last breath and the spark leaving and whatnot. And you, if I heard right, said, that could have happened earlier too, not just with the last breath, because we had a day where we felt like it was his last coherent day. And he recognized us after we thought he's kind of gone. Then he was there, and he did some of that. He said, he told me, he said, Kevin, I wrote it down, but my beautiful son, you were a gift, something just real brief, and then went to my sister, and then went to my brother, and then definitely, my mom as well. I don't know if I'd call it a blessing, but it was a recognition. And even that was, what a gift. Not everybody's going to get that if dad gets hit by a bus or is not in the right frame. But it again made me consider now, back to parenting. What can I do? What can I give my kids now? Every day, sure. But even, I hadn't thought about it again, Alua, of kind of that annual thing. What about an annual wrap up of, hey, kid, wife, just want you to know, I'm going to give this to you. I hope that I'm here next year. but just in case. Man, we don't do why, and why? I guess why not? There's nothing to lose, is there?
Nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. Everything to gain. And some people, I think maybe a bit of the ego is like crushed to say, hey, I might not be here, but what a beautiful gift to leave. And even if that ends up not being the last day or year, then you have that foundation to build upon. And don't you want to tell the people in your life how you feel about them? The gift that they are to you regularly? I love this, Kevin. Let me know how it goes.
It brings up, when I think of that, it brings up, it's probably not a red flag, but it's something important that it brings up almost, it's too weighty. It's too vulnerable to do that. But that's probably good reason to do it.
I think so.
I think so.
I think so. I think vulnerability is something that we must be consistently in the practice of while we're living. And, not everything in the world is preparing us for our dying, but we experience a lot of it when we're dying too. And so to the extent that we can practice some of that vulnerability now, how wonderful. How wonderful. Yeah.
I feel like that's a mic drop. Otherwise I may get emotional or something, which I've never done on here. Maybe that's what we should do.
Awful. That'd be so terrible to have an emotion publicly.
I'm not prepared for that. I'm not prepared for that. It's significant. I can't, doing this conversation with you. I mean, that's a big deal. I want to look at this right now, not with morbidity, but with why wouldn't I? There's nothing we've talked about that would be anything but a net gain. And even if it brings up hard things, it's stuff that needs to be brought up. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the chance.
Yeah. Who would you speak to?
I think it would be, my first thought is just testifying to my kids of kind of that, I think I've always grappled with that concept of the blessing, again, coming from a background, a biblical background, a little bit, struggle with that, but just an almost like an affirming of, hey, I see you. And this is what I see in you. The things that I'm not a natural encourager. It doesn't come into my mind. I just, of course I love you and things are great. I mean, I think I speak a lot of affirmations, but I'm not a natural encourager, but to say, the things that maybe come up, like a birthday will happen. Oh my gosh, we just had Father's Day, and one of my daughters wrote me a note, and I read it, and I said, I can die now. I'm good. I mean, just put this on there's the obituary, put it on my tombstone. If that's how you experience me, because she basically said that no matter what, she knows I'm there for her.
Yeah.
And that's how can I do that with each kid now, and why not? And why not? And you know what? We'll trade text. I need a text from you in a few weeks. I don't want to, this is one of those weighty things I don't want to let go. And I want to bring it back, and I want to gift this to people. Okay. Maybe we should do a part 2 and come back and give people a to-do list.
And see how it went for you.
I just so honor what you're doing. I am enthralled by it. And I almost want to be a pen pal and hear the next story. Literally, as I was going through your book, I wanted to go through the next story. Here's a real life example. This is what happened. This is what they said. This is what they felt. This is the wisdom of the ages. I mean, it doesn't get any more acute than this. I mean, I can be right here. I can have the next guest on, and it's somebody in their middle age. They've been researching whatever, and it's the greatest wisdom, and it's really good. But man, these people are dying. I mean, there's no holds barred here. It doesn't get more real. And I think it's just looking at your stuff has just given me weight on me, the enormity of it and really the value of it. Yeah. We're not surrounded, most of us, by elderly people, and we don't glean from them, and they may not be in the place, but you're almost getting the best. You're getting the best of us.
I think so. I think it's the best job in the world. And many people, think it has to be so sad or depressing or horrible. And I think, no, I get to be with humans. Like I get to be with humans and they're the full gamut of humaning.
Yeah.
It's such a level of trust,
Yeah.
and it's a position of deep, deep, deep honor. And I'm grateful every single time. I'm grateful to you for how much you shared of yourself with me today, because this is a part of it too. It's also available all the time as we talk about our relationship to mortality and the things that we fear and the places that we don't want to go and the things that we desire and all of that stuff. It's such an honor to be able to hold humans in this way. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question though. As you said that, you said the best job in the world, and you talked earlier about teaching and training people in this. If somebody's listening going, holy smokes, I, I want to, I'm interested in doing that. Where can they go to you or elsewhere? Where can they go to say, I might be interested in pursuing this?
Oh, well, we teach folks at Going with Grace, which is the business that I run, the organization that focuses on death doula training and also service. So we're able to match people up with folks that need death doulas. We have a directory. We've trained about 2,500 students in 17 countries so far. Really looking at all the elements of being with our mortality while supporting other people through theirs. And so we have in-person retreats and a bunch of courses online, opportunities for people to do death meditations and engage with their mortality if they don't want to become a death doula, but just a lot of ways for us to start thinking about our death in a way that we find useful and also ultimately be able to support other people and ourselves when our time comes.
Is it literally goingwithgrace.com?
That's it.
Okay. All right. I'll put that in the intro as well.
Okay.
Alua, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
What a gift. We need to stay in contact. I want to continue unpacking this for myself, my family, and my audience. So thank you.
Fantastic.
Friends, thanks for joining me on this drive. That again is Alua Arthur, A-L-U-A Arthur. And the book that you can get anywhere is Briefly, Perfectly Human, Making an Authentic Life by Getting Real About the End. Her website is goingwithgrace.com. And again, questions, comments, thoughts on this for me or for Alua, let me know. I'll get them to her if needed. You can find me by email at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. I hope this episode helps you drive further, and most of all, enjoy the ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.